Well, ready or not, apparently the Hulu Hellraiser will be coming back. Now, this is not yet an official announcement, but the producer has promised that they are actively pursuing a sequel to the 2022 reboot from Hulu, which is technically its own Hellraiser universe. And seeing the film, I thought it was very decent. Most fans loved it. I thought it was pretty good, but again, I wasn't as enthusiastic. Nevertheless, they laid down the groundwork for very interesting stories to come. And he is saying that if they do get the chance to do the sequel, it will be much more crazy than you can imagine. So that is very, very heartening to hear. But where are they along in the quote unquote development process? Well, apparently they are fairly along the way. At the moment, he's busy with the Omen film, which he is also producing, but he says that they are very much hard at work at thinking through how to do it again and that they learned a lot in constructing the Cenobites and working on the designs, and that will be used in any future plans with Hellraiser. And although I do find this very, very interesting and intriguing, I can't lie, I'm still curious if the Doug version of Pinhead and that version of Hellraiser can also be resurrected as well. And there, I don't know what to tell people. Apparently, it's still with HBO or technically Max. It's technically with David Gordon Green, and no updates there. So, in terms of the Doug universe, that has to be a different rights regime. It's a little confusing if you're just stepping in. There are technically two Hellraisers now. There is the Hulu Hellraiser, that is its own regime, and the HBO Hellraiser, and that is its own thing. I'm not quite sure how they're splitting the rights. Apparently, somebody has the rights to the film, somebody has the rights to the TV, etc., etc., etc. So it's an interesting question. If they do the sequel, can this be a theatrical release? As far as I know, no. Right? They have this loophole that they can do Hellraiser, but it has to be through streaming and streaming only. I wonder if Clive Barker can step in and somehow negotiate this. But at the moment, if they do a reboot, it will still have to be through Hulu and directly through quote streaming and or television. It can't get a theatrical release just yet. So it'll be interesting if they can do something with that loophole. But as far as I know, there's really no chance it'll be a cinematic Hellraiser universe that's being revived. Nevertheless, it's very encouraging news because if you are a Hellraiser fan, that you know that most of the sequels have been fairly disappointing. So it just seemed one of the many, many stories from the 1980s that we have to basically say, well, it's over. It peaked in the 1990s, got decimated in the late 90s, and we need to move on. And in fact, it's pretty interesting that almost all these other really interesting dark horror stories, whether Predator and or Hellraiser, as well as Alien, kind of seem to peak in the early 90s, and they may do well in novels and comics, but in terms of the films, it just kept getting lower and lower and lower in quality and just became more and more ridiculous and just complete parodies of themselves. You thought, but Hellraiser 2022 was extremely well done. Although I do nitpick a few flaws here and there, overall it was a very intriguing story. It was tonally correct. It's a very adult film, very bloody, but never self-indulgent. So I thought it was a nice mix, very respectful of the mythology, and did as much as they could. You couldn't use certain phraseologies. For instance, they never called the box to limit configuration and things like that. But beyond those small nitpicks, I thought it was a very worthy sequel to, frankly, the 1990s, where, yes, technically those sequels that continued had the Hellraiser name, but if you know the behind the scenes drama, they don't really have much to do with Hellraiser. Very welcome news to Hellraiser fans, but again, it could be they just got really lucky with the first one, and we're going to start the process all over again where the sequels are going to keep diminishing what they had with the original. But we'll have to wait and see. Very welcome news, but again, at this point, we should be proceeding cautiously with Hellraiser.